What's happening, hardscapers? This is episode 48 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk to you about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And today we're joined by Brian Fortner of Bartell Global, and he's here to talk with us about compaction, obviously a very crucial part of the installation process. And there's a lot of great information provided here. So without further ado, here's our interview with Brian. Today, we're joined by Brian Fortner. He is the National Sales Manager for Bartell Global, and he's here today to talk with us about everything compaction on the job site. Brian, thank you so much for joining me here.
Hey, thank you very much, Mike. Glad to be here.
Let's just get started to get to know a little bit more about yourself and Bartell Global. Can you give our audience a little bit of a background about how you got started in the industry, what brought you to Bartell, and maybe a little bit about the company?
Okay, absolutely, and I appreciate that. Basically, I've been in the industry for say 40 years, so I've got a gray hair, I think, for each and every one of those years. But I started in the industry in the diamond cutting, grinding, and sawing, as well as drilling industry. Took a company basically into a manufacturer, into creating a sales force, etc. Did that for a number, I would say 6 years. Then opened up another diamond tooling company that went, I would say, my duration for about 17 years, and kind of reached a point where I had done anything and everything and kind of reached a plateau, I would say, in the diamond aspect of things. And I was just craving something more invigorating, some new challenges, things of that. A lot of that happened during the recession times. We all think back to the 2008. And I actually saw where there was a company named Bartell who was kind of kicking the norm to the side, and they were not retracting, they were not reducing sales force, they were actually looking to expand their footprint and presence into the North American market versus their home base of Canadian territory. So I contacted Bartell, and basically, lo and behold, we ended up putting a partnership together, and we have been together for 10 years now. And Bartell, our North American entity, we've had some exciting things happen here over the last 2-3 years. Our corporate headquarters now in North America is based out of Louisville, Kentucky, and things that we would provide to the hardscape market, as well as other general construction, rental, concrete, dirt, etc. We have all types of manufacturing there in Louisville. So we've got compaction that we manufacture there. We've got trowels, surface prep equipment, transport equipment, concrete, dirt hauling, buggies, et cetera, et cetera. So many things there in Louisville, and just couldn't be happier. Things are going very, very well. And our footprint, we've expanded and acquiring, I would say, 5 companies over the last 7 years. So really, we have just about anything and everything to complete the cycle of the concrete.
The thing that caught my eye with Bartell is that little mini reversible plate compactor. And it's the first time I heard about Bartell in the industry, and I was happy to reach out and get somebody on the show to talk about compaction. So, Brian, can you talk about the importance of compaction on the job site? I'm sure most of our audience understands it, but can you give our audience a little bit of a breakdown about the importance of compaction?
Absolutely, and it's not indifferent to anything else, from buildings to, anything strong up top takes a solid foundation. We're talking about marriages, we're talking about hardscape, we're talking about commercial building, etc. So, 70% of the time in labor, etc., could and should be put into creating the right foundation, whether it be for hardscape or laying concrete, etc. And I would say that the critical aspect of that is that you really, really want to make sure that you get that rock solid foundation. You want to, when it comes to hardscaping, you want to get down first off to the sub base, to where you get rid of any type of organic material, get down to an undisturbed portion of land that you're not going to experience any sinking or dipping or voids. And basically, the compaction is just that. It's consolidation of a sub-base and base to give a very hard structure to put your top layer on. It eliminates any type of future sinking, shifting, dipping, voids, erosion, collection of water that can freeze and expand, and really just a buckling or a crumbling of the aggregate above.
Now, when it comes to after that excavation and you have that subsoil, the undisturbed subsoil, and you want to compact that, what machine are we looking at in terms of compaction, and what are we doing in order to be able to compact that subsoil?
So if you are down to let's just say in an area where you have a clay structure or what have you, you could very well have a starting foundation there that you can go ahead and start creating your fill material. If there is no organic matter, if you've actually removed all of that. If you have a larger area and you are working, or even a smaller area, and you have a clay base or a dirt base there that seems to have rises and falls or what have you, you can actually come in there and work with a striking type tool. If it go in with a rammer, at Bartell we make 3 types of rammers, but basically that's a shearing type downward force that would compact that. We call that cohesive material, and that clay structure or substrate, basically it's a binding material with moisture. So you need, rather than just a vibratory method, you need a striking method. So in a smaller application such as that, around footers or headers, or around house structures or entire areas, a rammer does a really good job of doing that on the soil. And then also, if you were, you could use something such as a sheet foot roller that actually vibrates and rolls, but it's a much larger machine, and typically for a much larger work area.
Gotcha. And then with compaction, is there such thing as over compaction, overdoing it, or should we just go until like our heart's content?
Well, yeah, I think actually once you get to a compacted point, there's no need to keep going over and over. I think then you only have I would say the chance or risk of displacing material that has already settled into place. Compaction as a whole, it is basically applying a downward force for consolidation. You're taking larger and smaller substrates or materials. You're actually letting them fall and work their way into place. Typically into your sub base, you're going to work it as you can into the soil. You get it to a certain compaction rate, and then there's no sense in just, compacting for a day or what have you, because there reaches a time to where you're not going to do any more there, and you are actually going to do more harm than good and displace the aggregate.
When it comes to compaction, is there any specific technique, whether you're compacting the subsoil or you're working on your lifts in terms of preparing that base? Is there any sort of technique that we should be using with the specified machine that we are using to compact, whether that's a rammer or a reversible plate compactor?
Absolutely. And, a lot of it is determined by the job and the material that is putting down, being placed down. And, is this going to be a pedestrian area? Is this going to be a pedestrian type area that you may have lawn tractors coming across, or golf carts, or UTVs, et cetera, or is this going to be in a paver scenario where you're driving vehicular traffic on? So you could be working as little as 4 inches, as a mid-scale of 6 inches, upwards to 10 to 12 inches, depending on weather and freeze lines and things of that. You may have to go even deeper with your bases. But one thing I think that it's important to say here is that basically, when you talk about compaction force, let's go back to what we were speaking real quick. Basically, compaction is mechanically increasing the density of a soil or base material, fill material. And force is describing really the dead weight of the machine being used that's applying a downward force on the base or the soil and compressing the particles. Okay, so that's just a little definition of compaction force and what we actually mean on compaction force. So talking about different ways, if you're coming in with crush and run, or using any type of fill material, etc., the rule of thumb is that you need 1,000 pounds of force 1,000 pounds of compaction force for every 1 inch of lift. And when we speak lift, we're speaking the height of the material that is actually being filled. Does that make sense, Mike?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay, so really, depending on what you're doing and the end result, you're going to have a recommended or a suggested base for that top product. Let's say we're going in and we're doing a pedestrian area and we're going to need a 4-inch base. So basically, if you're going to need 4-inch base to get up to grade and place your material, you're looking at 4 inches times 1,000 pounds. You're looking at 4,000 pounds of force that will be needed to properly compact and consolidate that material. So then I would look through and I would try to choose a machine that is going to give me every bit of that 4,000 pound in a published compaction force. And that's all going to be relevant to power, engine power, and weight and footprint of machine. So in saying that, I would come in, and if we were speaking Bartell and you wanted to talk a reversible plate, and we can get into the types, etc. I love reversibles because they're a bit heavier than forward. They give you the forward and backward motion, so it's very, very easy to spot compact or work around obstacles or get to the end of a run and simply back it up, get into corners, tight situations, or large scale areas. But on this one, I might actually choose to go with my second size machine that we call our BR 2750. That's going to give you 6,000 pounds of compaction force. So you know that that 4 inches of lift is going to be no problem. Once we have actually discerned what piece of equipment that we're going to be using, if you've got your fill in there, you want to basically screed that fill down and get it into somewhat of a smooth surface area where you're not riding up and down slopes with your mechanical plate compactor. So once you've kind of, screeded it with a rake screed or what have you, you can go in. And Paver Pete, myself, I think many would tell you that you like to start basically on one end, one corner, and you want to, if it's a squared area, you want to work it running the outer diameter and completing the square on the outer circumference. And then on your next pass, you would like to come in and basically overlap your first pass by about a third of the width of the machine. Okay? Mm-hmm. So you don't want to just marry up to your first pass on your second pass and run beside it. You actually want to overlap by about a third of the machine. That's going to keep any kind of windrows or elevations or plow lines or what have you from appearing there in that compaction material. So overlap a third and work it inward. Once you've worked it inward, you've done one pass of compaction. And another reason for doing it the way we just described is as you're working it from the outer in that circular fashion, kind of coming into a cyclonic center point, you're actually pinching the material inward towards each other. So as you're consolidating and as you're compacting, you're pinching that rock and that aggregate inwards rather than pushing or pinching it outwards. That I think just works much better. I think Pete would agree with me there. Once you've completed that first pass, then you want to run contradictive pass in a perpendicular fashion. And typically, you should never do any less than 2 passes, and I like to see it done with 3.
Gotcha. So when you're talking about that second pass, are you then going horizontally or vertically up and down? Or how would you describe that second pass again?
On the second pass, as you've made that starting first pass and you've worked your way inward, then I would start at any opposing corner and I would actually run it from right to left, back left to right, and work it that way, okay, in strips. You can run it in just straight line strips. Once you've done it that way, then you can actually start at an opposing corner and cross intersect that. So running a cross, if you will.
Now, how do we know that we've reached that optimal compaction? Is there anything that we can do to, say, test the base or take a look at the base to understand that, yes, we've done enough passes, we're good to go?
So I will tell you, there are shortcuts and there are proper ways. Okay. And proper ways can be truly, there are people in the field or testing facilities that if you really wanted it done right, you would either have someone in your staff that would have what we call a densimeter or actually a nuclear density tester. And that is a device. One is made by Troxler, and that's a device that basically is a small little a machine that's basically 6 inches wide and about a foot and a half long, held in a nice little carry case, and that comes with a base plate, a drill rod, and you would accompany that with like a heavy handheld mallet or a sledgehammer. So basically, a nuclear density tester is going to give you a moisture content reading and it's going to give you a density reading. So after you've compacted that 2 to 3 times, and I'm going to say 3, I would stop, making sure that you've got what appears to be a very nice compacted area. Then you're going to take your small handheld machine out. You're going to take your base plate, and it's a random test. You just pick a spot and basically sit your base plate down onto the compacted material, and you can kind of slither it left and right to seat it in, but it's just a large piece of steel with 2 holes in it that basically you sit down, and then you're going to put the drill rod down in one of the holes. And the drill rod typically has markings every 2 inches on the rod. Okay, are you following me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's just say we've done a 6-inch base. When you test with a nuclear density tester, basically you're going to go down no more than a half of what you have filled and compacted. So you would go on a 6-inch, you would go down 3 inches. So basically you'd split the difference in your 4-inch line and your 2-inch line. You would hammer with the mallet. You would hold the base plate in place with foot. You would hammer the actual drill rod down with the mallet. You'd go down to 3 inches. You would then pull that actual drill rod out. It's got a little pry bar. You pull that out, and what you've done is created a hole. What a lot of guys will do is they'll actually take something handy and they will trace around the outside of the base plate and then pull the base plate away. There's nothing fixing that base plate down. But the base plate and the actual handheld tester are the exact diameter and same footprint. So then you get your actual measurement device, you come over to that template you've just created, you lay it right down. It's got the rod that you slip through down to that desired depth, and it falls right into place. Then basically you turn it on, you put that you want it to read for roughly 1 minute. You want to give it 60 seconds of testing, and then you back away and let it do its thing. So that is called a nuclear density tester. And then I've seen jobs where guys will actually go down. I've seen Paver Pete where he takes a nice rod and basically does the same type test with a marking. And he'll say, okay, that took me 10 hits to get down 2.5 inches. I'm good to go here. So there's kind of an artisan feel to that as well.
Gotcha. That was a great visual and great description of how to go about that testing. And you also mentioned the compaction force. You're looking for, I believe you said 1,000 pounds per inch. You also talked about how the reversible plate compactors are a little bit heavier, so that you tend to lean more towards them for the compaction. What about the say square footage or square inches of a plate of a compactor? Does that play any role in terms of choosing a piece of equipment for compaction?
So as far as the footprint of the plate itself?
That's correct.
Absolutely. I mean, if I would say when you look at a machine and you look at a job that's to be done, I mean, there's some kind of a layman's term here of saying, man, I look at that machine, that's a heavier machine, that's going to go deeper per pass, that's got a bigger footprint, I'm going to be able to cover more footage per pass, etc. So in a very large scale area, I would go as large a footprint as I could tolerate as far as being able to haul, mobility, things of that nature. So most definitely. And on the, the counter side of that, you don't want to be in a trench and in an area where, as you said, that small reversible that we at Bartell have, our BR1570, that thing is an anomaly. No one else in the industry has anything of that size or footprint with a 3,500 pounds compaction force in that small and compact of 177 pound unit. So that's a tool where you can get in and you can work in sidewalks, you can work on patios, you can work in areas where you're running different types of pavers and wall structures, etc. It's a hybrid of sorts because I have some people that actually use it in trenches in lieu of rammers. So that little guy it's absolutely awesome. But yeah, basically the wider the footprint, the wider the plate, the more surface foot you're going to cover, you're going to cut down on labor, you're going to cut down on time, and you're still going to deliver that downward force throughout that entire footprint.
And we've covered a few different pieces of equipment that you offer there. You talked about the rammer, you talked about the small, or we talked about the small reversible plate compactor, the larger ones that you have. When somebody is first in the market for a plate compactor or whatever it may be, we've talked about the different uses, but what features should we be looking for when we're shopping for a plate compactor? What features does Bartell Global have with their plate compactors that you would say, you know what, this is why you should be coming to us for your compactors. This is what you should be looking for in your plate compactor to be able to purchase the one that's going to suit your needs.
Absolutely. And thanks for asking, Mike. I do want to circle back real quick because one thing I think is important, we didn't speak a lot about forward plates, but I will tell you there is a time and place for forward only plates. And that's a plate that basically you walk behind, and when you get to the end of the run, you have a decision to make. You either turn right around on its axis or you rotate and pivot the handle around and turn it that way. There is no backing up. But on maneuverable areas and areas that have latitude and no wall structures or things, and you can get turned around, they are a very popular method of compacting because they're lightweight, they're fairly inexpensive. And also too, I just wanted to let you know at Bartell, every one of our forward plates, as well as my first few series of reversible plates, actually are tapped underneath for what we call a polyurethane paver mat. And that paver mat is a very thick, very dense polyurethane material that basically rides between the plate of the machine itself and the top of the pavers. You don't want to be cracking and vibrating and beating down on precious stone and concrete that you've spent a lot of money on. So you need a buffer in between. So that polyurethane mat allows you to get on the top, seat the pavers and things in the sand above the base, etc., and give a proper seat with the products without damaging those stones. Okay. So having said that, features that I would look for, if Brian Fortner were going to buy a hardscape machine that I'm going to take from small to mid-sized jobs, etc., I'd opt for a reversible plate. I love the mechanism of being able to go forward in one speed and back it up with just the twitch of two fingers, a small little handle that takes no effort at all to reverse the momentum of that machine. I think if you run into an area, I always see Paver Pete or others, they'll spray paint mark a spot on a compacted area where they felt a dip or need to add more product or what have you. So if you need to come back without redoing the whole area with the reversible, you can actually feather it forward, back, forward, and you can spot compact into spot minute areas that may need further compaction. And then also, I would look for little things that mean a lot when it comes to plate compactors. Plate compactors are a big piece of weight. They are like a big chunk of steel sitting there. It takes manpower. It takes something to move. So I would opt for a plate compactor that had a mobility as a plus. And what I mean by that is a wheel kit that is self-contained that you can drop down. You can actually take the machine off of the truck or trailer, drop the wheel set into place, and get it over across hard product to the job site. You can wheel it to and from the truck, to and from the warehouse, etc. I would also, as a feature in a plate, I would look for a throttle control that's handy to the operator. And that's one thing that Bartell we do. We like to say that fully loaded is just our standard. These are not options that you have to ask for when it comes to Bartell plates for hardscape. Mm-hmm. We give you the mobile wheelbase as a standard feature. We give you operator throttle control near the upward handle. So your hands do not have to leave the actual handle like a lot of the competition and reach around that entire machine to try to govern the throttle on that Honda engine. That is a backache. That is a back pull, a strain, and an accident running over the foot. It's just a problem waiting to happen. So throttle control on the handle is incredibly important. I would make sure that you've got, we do an integrated 1-point tuck-away hoist hook on our machines. Very center weighted, very center balanced. If you're going across large projects or towing these with anything with a strap or belt, you don't want the machine to invert or tip while transporting. Tow hook is very nice for taking a machine through a sloppy work area or a distance, and for security. I would also look for a reputable engine. I would look for an on-off kill switch up near the handle that we do offer as well. One other thing I'm going to say about compaction, not many people look down at the actual plate that we talked about. So at the very bottom of a forward plate, the very bottom of a reversible plate, that plate that actually hits the surface, in my opinion, should be a cast iron plate. You will see many steel bottom plates out there in the industry. And, when you think of steel, you say, oh, well, nothing's stronger than steel. Actually, when it comes to compaction, it's more costly for me to produce a casting and an iron plate, but it will deliver and transmit the vibration and the weight created by that plate downward for deeper consolidation. So it's much more efficient and effective than a steel plate. Steel will actually absorb vibration and work contradictive to what you're trying to deliver.
That's awesome advice. And just to get those different features broken down for us really helps to highlight everything that we're looking for when it comes to a compactor, because a lot of those things I would have never even considered until you highlighted them there. And we've talked about a lot with compaction in this episode, a lot of great value, a lot of great advice throughout this episode. Brian, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd want to highlight before we close out this interview? Anything else that we maybe haven't discussed yet, or anything else that you want to highlight one more time?
Yes, just as a highlight, I think it's very important, we get asked this at trade shows and abroad, is that to understand the true meaning, why would I need a plate compactor versus a rammer? And I'm going to just say it very simply put. A plate compactor, whether it's a forward only or whether it's reversible and forward, those are vibratory machines that basically are designed for what we call non-cohesive material. So that's gravel, that's sand, that's substrate or particulates that may be mixed in with a soil or clay. So anytime you need to seed in aggregate and not strike it hard or shoot it out the side or displace it, that's when you need a plate compactor. A rammer, on the other hand, is more like, I like to envision the guy before a baseball game with the hand tamp, filling in the holes around home plate. He puts some clay there and he strikes it downward with that hand tamp. Same thing with a rammer. That is a striking type force, and that is designed for use in cohesive type soils. And that's your clays and dirts and things that have a moisture content that tend to stick together when you pack them.
Gotcha. And when it comes back, circling this back around, when it comes to moisture content with our gravels, if they're too dry, should we wet them down before compaction? And how much wetting down should we do in terms of that before compaction?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's kind of an artisan deal too, because you're dealing with different climates and different humidities and different dry out factors and all. But most definitely, when you're putting in a sub base and base or what, you need actually moisture in there, because moisture will allow that sub base to actually adhere together. It will allow it to pack together and really, really kind of glue itself into place. Moisture will also take that top layer and it'll work as somewhat of a lubricant. And as you're vibrating across and compacting, it will allow the smaller particles to work its way around in the larger particles, and it gives a non-friction, non-resistance, and kind of an easy way for those to set into place. You don't need to be in there with a flooding type of wetness. And again, those gauges that we talked about, that nuclear density tester, densimeter, they have my mind's just escaped me, but another method of testing moisture. You just don't need too much, but you do need some. If you have too much, then the material really kind of glides across and will not seat itself. You're basically washing materials where they do not need to be. There will be a collection of smaller materials in certain areas, and they won't find their way to fill all the voids.
Absolutely. And one last question for you that just came in my head. We talked about choosing the right compactor for the depth that you are compacting. But if you don't have a machine, say you're doing a 12-inch base for a driveway, and you don't have a machine capable of compacting 12 inches in one pass, is it okay? Is there any negative consequences of splitting that up into, say, lifts of 6 inches or lifts of 4 inches if you need to, other than the time that you're spending in extra labor to compact those different lifts?
Mike, I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's an incredible point that we needed to make. And I'm glad we did not end by you not asking that. You know, it's just like I call it step filling or what have you. You may not have access to a large compactor. Your pocket may not afford being able to rent or buy one of those at a particular time. So if you need to get to 12 inches, look at your machine. If you've got a machine that will tolerate 4 inches of lift, well, okay, you're going to need to actually fill that in 3 steps. Okay. Is it going to hurt in doing so? No, it's just what you said. It's time and a little more labor, a little longer in the day, but you can pour your 4 inches, run the compaction, do it the way that we talked earlier in conversation, then come back in and pile it right back up on top of it, do it again. And I'm talking with a very base small machine. You can achieve consolidation at 12 inches if you do that in 3 passes with a machine that will do upwards to 4 inches.
Absolutely. And great advice and a great way to round out this interview. Brian, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hey, thank you, Mike. And if you don't mind, would you mind if I put a plug in and just gave a website that I think gives a lot of good advice when it comes to compaction and will allow your listening audience to peruse and look around at some of the products that we've spoken about?
Absolutely. We'd love to learn more about the Bartell Global products and the different features that it has available. Let us know where our audience can find that.
Okay. If you're online and working on a computer or want to pull it up on your phone or tablet, I would encourage you to go to www.bartellglobal.com. That's BARTELL global.com. And if you wanted to call in and get some advice, whether it's on a competitive machine, our machine, or just, hey, what do I do in this, for instance, you can dial 888-999-1570. And we welcome speaking to you through any situation and hopefully finding the best solution for your project.
And that's a great number to call and pick the brain of somebody in terms of choosing the right plate compactor, rammer, whatever it may be for your business. And Brian, is that going to work for North America? Is that Canada and the US?
Yeah, so that is actually our US number, but they're all tied in together. So we actually have the UK, we've got Canada, we've got North America, et cetera, numerous different manufacturing points. But for the bulk of your audience, if they called in, we could just switch that over in a line.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Visit us at howtohardscape.com for more information on the subject, and let us know what you want to learn about in future episodes by reaching out to us on our social channels. We're really enjoying all the feedback we're getting. We're at howtohardscape on Instagram and Facebook, or email us contact@howtohardscape.com. And if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a rating and a review if you're using Apple Podcasts. This really helps us get this podcast out there and into more people's ears. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.